Why no culture but biblical culture can actually function properly. Hello and welcome back. I'm glad you could be here. Glad I could be here. Okay, so today we're going to be doing something a little bit different because while I've been on this electronic fast, it's really, really easy to just go down rabbit holes. It's so easy. Anyway, but for a long time now, I've been looking at some of the cultures around the world. The most successful, the most fractured, the most broken, and the most extinct. Okay, so all this started with a rabbit hole I went down several years ago about Bible, giants, hybrids, the poles, both north and south, old maps, natural disasters, natural resources, the theory or idea of race and skin color in general, the various pagan religions around the world, and throughout time. The sky, the things coming from it, literally it went everywhere. But one place I've been sort of peeking into but not searching is culture, because so many cultures are just wicked. Especially the cultures of this time we live in now. But I mean, they were also really wicked back in the day. Ancient cultures, been there. Dead cultures, check. But one thing I've learned is that all of these cultures outside of the Bible begin and end the same way, without Yahuwah. Every dead culture, every struggling culture, every nation, every culture or nation on the verge of collapse begins without Yahuwah, develops without Yahuwah, and ends without ever having known Yahuwah. Another thing I've noticed about many cultures that aren't doing so well, past, present, and definitely in the future, if you believe in prophecy, which you should, is that they always make attempts at outright theft when they realize they're not going to survive. For instance, in the Bible times, many nations conquered and were conquered. This is just a fact. When a nation or culture realized it was in danger of extinction, or even, in the process of conquering, it usually tried to take on the youths of other groups, which is, say, the young people, brainwash them into following the culture of the oppressor, which is the person trying to take over or trying to be in charge, and then use their life force to sustain the people in power. Sound familiar? Okay, this is just witchcraft, though. This is literally a form of witchcraft. But fast forward to current times, many countries with decreasing birth rates, meaning they're having fewer babies, and the country is mostly made up of elderly people and very few children. Many of these countries are beginning to accept massive numbers of immigrants in order to add to the workforce. Now, a lot of the countries where these immigrants are coming from, they're not really defeated, or they haven't been defeated in current times in terms of conquering and, but they still live in a state of sort of defeat because the people themselves are already in a state of poverty and severe lack of resources because of their current governments or the centuries of abuse the country has endured at the hands of colonialism. But they're already in sort of a state where they don't feel like they're advancing. But anyway, back to the point. The before-mentioned countries, the ones with decreasing birth rates, who are inviting masses of immigrants in, suddenly have a plan. They're not being kind, certainly not. They need the younger people to work so that their taxes and general labor can support the older people who can no longer work. Now, this seems like a good idea, but in actuality, this is really messed up. Think about it. When a country is in their prime, they refuse to take in anyone, help anyone, or invite people who they see as lesser than them, or even less fortunate, into their space. They're just like, no, we don't want immigrants. We don't want anyone who, sadly enough, they don't value. However, this changes when their own culture, thoughts, ideas, morals, and practices betray them. Literally, a lot of these countries get into the situations that they're in because of their own culture. Their culture is destructive. Their culture is not sustainable. And yet they want people to afterward come and help them clean up the mess by working and doing the things that I used to be able to do, or that I want you to do, in order to take care of me. When their culture proves to be toxic, unsustainable, unhealthy, and impractical, they need the same people who they assume themselves to be better than to come and take care of them, work the jobs they used to work, and give the economy a boost. They expect all this, with the added bonus that instead of immigrants bringing their own culture into the land, that the immigrants will instead change their lifestyles and adopt the lifestyles and cultures of the same people who destroyed their own system and way of life with their destructive culture. It just doesn't make sense. Now, immigration isn't anything new. Since the beginning of time, people were migrating from place to place. There are even whole nations and people groups that are known for this. Like, it's just how it is. Back in biblical times, when Yahuwah's chosen people, the nation of Yasharal, was thriving, or well before that, even at their conception, people were migrating into their land and beginning new lives. They literally did the same thing. They migrated into Egypt, then they migrated out of Egypt, and then people who were from Egypt or who were living in Egypt came with them. But the thing is, when they're living and beginning their new lives, it's under the laws of Yahuwah and with the protection of his chosen people. But yeah, now during the times in which Yasharah was faithful and obedient to Yahuwah, we see they had need of nothing, which is to say, they weren't struggling. They weren't in danger of being extinct. They were having lots of children and being able to actually support them. They had lots of resources and land and animals. They had all that they could ever want, and were the most successful nation of all time because their culture revolved around Yahuwah. Side note, I notice homeless people or homelessness is not really mentioned in the Bible. Even when the people leave home and they get into a situation that's not comfortable, they're always able to actually have some place to go back to. You're not homeless. But okay, I'm going on a tangent. If a culture isn't centered around something real, something constant, something faithful, and something pure, it will not endure. A nation that revolves around acquisition will not last because after a while they run out of things to acquire. A nation centered around perversion will not last because eventually everyone will end up destroying themselves. This is what perversion does. It's the act of misusing something. Okay, a small tangent. So let's say, for example, Yahuwah created something for one purpose and we begin using it for a completely different purpose. We're practicing perversion. A lot of people don't realize this, but they are. A lot of times perversion is used to pertain mostly to your body, which is true. When you're using your body in any way, shape, or form, or even parts of your body in ways that they're not intended to be used, you are perverting it. So don't be surprised if you have problems with perversion. But anyway, perversion usually refers to the body, like I said, but in actuality, it can refer to anything being used outside of its original purpose. So, yes, Little Mermaid, using a fork for a hair comb, you're perverting it, yes. Anyway, a nation centered around a false god, like we'll speak about in an upcoming video about language, cannot last because in order to obtain anything from a false god, you have to pay a heavy price. Which brings us to the next point of my tangent. What country or nation in the world worships Yahuwah? I mean, Yahuwah completely and only. A nation that will not allow the inhabitants, whether they're natives or immigrants, to live there in their land and worship someone or something else. What nation is this? Wasn't it because of this that the nation of Yasharah was destroyed anyway? They allowed the influences of other nations that don't worship Yahuwah, nations with evil and counterproductive cultures, to influence them. They began to follow these other nations and in some ways became worse than them. They were bad to the point where Yahuwah was literally telling them that all the things he destroyed the previous inhabitants of that land for doing, they were now doing. Many of these nations that Yasharah was following were places with huge gaps between the rich and the poor, places with people living on the streets, having no place to go because people who were more powerful had taken everything from them. These places practiced a type of religion and belief that involved taking the lives of innocent children. These other places didn't care about the poor, the sick, or the elderly. These other places were not in the best financial situations. Their resources were dried up, and the only thing they had was their influence. Their trickery, their sorcery, which would convince many other nations, countries, and people to become like them. Wicked nations be like, destroy what you have, live for today. Take what you want from others when you can no longer get it for yourself. Use the life force of another when you've already wasted your own life force on fruitless acquisitions. Entice them with your acceptance, but ensnare them with your sin. Isn't this what happened throughout time? Assyria, Babylon, Inca, Aztec, Maya, Ainu, Greek Empire, Persian Empire, the Manchu, the Kushan, Celts. There's literally so many examples, it's hard to name them all. But take a close look. Who is the final boss that we're facing today? Think about it. Just think. Who was the last player to issue a challenge? Seemingly the last on the scene, but causing the biggest stir. And they're not new. They're old. They conquer you with their sin. They entice you with their fake luxuries. And they steal your best and brightest to keep for themselves after they've imploded, instead of reforming themselves. This isn't a new thing either. It's an old thing. It's something from before. But people forget because people's memories are short. And then once you're conquered, you kind of lose certain things. And the person who wins gets to tell what happened, even if it's not the truth. But this isn't a new thing. It's been happening all over the world and all throughout time. People have lived luxuriously. They've lived luxuriously, and now they're at risk of running out of resources, workers, and space because they've polluted their own space. They've practiced conspicuous consumption, meaning they've consumed so much in such a huge way, their own resources, and they've worked their workers into the ground, so they have nothing left. They literally have to start stealing. And now they're sneaking into the holes in other people's cultures and inserting themselves as a friend, only to begin setting up the trap of a lifetime. It's the long con. Immigration is only a problem in countries where the culture is corrupt. And it's only a solution when they failed and they need a way to use the immigrants in a way that they can't use their own people. A country or nation with a healthy Yahuwah-serving culture never has a problem with people, but with who they serve. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. I know this was too serious. It's so serious. Oh my goodness. But it needed to be said. After all, this is the future we face. Or this is the future some will face. But let's just not be ignorant of Satan's devices, please. Don't allow yourselves to be enticed by the idea of moving abroad and beginning again, only to find yourself smothered under the cultural practices that country will force upon you. Unless a country is Bible-fearing or like following Bible and fearing Yahuwah, it doesn't matter. It will always be the same type of culture. It will be a destructive type of culture. Bible says to come out of for my people. We have to live in this world, but we're not a part of this world or of this world. This world is passing away, remember. It's time to disengage. Stay out of the affairs of these other nations and cultures because you unknowingly could be getting in the way of their judgment or allowing yourself to suffer with them. Why suffer? I don't know. I just don't want that. Just stay set apart. And until next time, Hallelujah.